Welcome to the Epik Mellon podcast, conversations with the real humans behind broadband networks, cybersecurity, and the future of communications. Brought to you by QA Cafe. In this episode, we talk to Melissa Simpler of Nokia about the twists and turns of the broadband industry as a whole and why we stay in it after all these years. Hi, everyone. Jason here again from the Epik Mellon podcast. I am joined today by Melissa Simpler from Nokia, who's been, has some interesting perspectives, particularly in the US about broadband networks. But, I always try to find people who have sort of dynamic stories of not only how they got here, but the things that you end up dealing with, right? So it's not quite as straightforward as some other people's roles, I think. Right. So, I think we'll have a good time. And as usual, the Epik Mellon is funded entirely by my employers at QA Cafe, and the opinions expressed by myself or any of our guests do not reflect those of QA Cafe or its leadership. And I assume that goes the same for you with no. All right. So, as I was saying, we're entirely funded by QA Cafe. So I like to give a little preview of some of our products. We have three products: CD Router, CloudTrack, and Passport. The first is CD Router, and CD Router is the industry standard test solution for gateways, Wi-Fi routers, and other customer premises equipment. CD Router contains thousands of fully automated test cases designed by network experts, covering feature validation, stability, certification, and performance all in one. Moreover, QA Cafe's world-class support team acts as an extension of your own, helping you understand the technologies and build better products overall. Our second product is called CloudTrack. CloudTrack is the way to make network packet captures an easy and useful part of your cybersecurity workflows. CloudTrack helps you work on tough issues together without passing around large trace files, losing data, or risking security leaks of valuable information, and helps entry-level analysts learn from your senior experts, curate best practices, and standardize operating procedures around packet captures. And lastly, QA Cafe's Passport is a fully automated solution for testing the connectivity and interoperability of IoT and smart home devices. Testing with Passport is as simple as connecting your device, selecting tests, and getting clear pass-fail results with full log data and packet captures to find and resolve bugs before they end up as a bad review of your product. To find out more about CD Router, CloudTrack, and Passport, visit us at www.qacafe.com. All right. Well, hi, Melissa. How are you?
Hello. It sounds like you've made those message points a time or two.
Yeah. They were longer. And people were like, maybe you should make those shorter before you continue. So I took the advice. So even though it's nice because it's kind of like, I've listened to a ton of podcasts before I started doing this. And, the ones that are actually officially sponsored by people usually have a segment where it'll be like a sound effect goes off and they're like, okay, now we're in advertising mode before we start. So I was like, all right, I'll just front load all that stuff to the beginning of the podcast. Cool. So how are you? How are you doing?
Great. It's a sunny and hot day in Austin, Texas.
Oh yeah. As
Record
usual,
heat waves.
Right? They always say that about Austin. It's like always a record heat wave. So like, when is it not one?
Well, if there was ever a summer to help some of those Californians that have migrated here move back, it would be this one.
Do you hear that, guys?
Just kidding.
I've heard that. Yeah. All right. So, listen, you're familiar with the format of the show a little bit, and I got introduced to you through some broadband forum stuff and the Connected Home Council, and how we're always sort of talking about marketing some of the new standards to the larger universe, particularly operators, right? So tell me a little bit about you and how you even got to be where you are right now. And a little bit about what you're doing at Nokia now.
Well, thank you for asking the question. I think I do like this question. I think I can say that the first seed planted for getting my bachelor's degree in electrical engineering was my dear
Oh, you
old
did?
dad. So
Oh, nice.
when I was finishing my high school year and he asked me what I wanted to study, I had no clue, kind of like my younger and 17-year-old son today. But he said, you're good at math and science, and engineering can get you anywhere. So he encouraged me to go. And I said, why the heck not? So from that undergraduate experience at University of Texas, longtime Austinite, um, my first career employer was Motorola, specifically their semiconductor group. And
Okay. Okay.
I was first in just embedded controllers, moved into automotive electronics. And if you think there aren't many females in engineering, try automotive engineering.
I can't even imagine.
And then I had an opportunity to take a short stint at Dell, but quickly got recruited back to Motorola to work on a joint venture that led me into broadband. And that joint venture was with Apple, IBM, and Motorola to create the most advanced processor called PowerPC. And we did that. And Motorola was relegated to embedded. And we identified the broadband home as the thing that would consume and drive high volumes of chips. So this was in the late 90s. At that time, the faster WAN circuits were ADSL and VDSL. And away we
even
went.
Then they were super rudimentary then, right?
Yes. But, despite all that, we created the vision. And of course, because we were building that field of dreams, as they call it, we had to actually make the product also because we were so far ahead of the market. And so that meant we evolved from chip to reference design to box and software to essentially stand up the first Netflix. We were streaming. This box became called the Stream Master, and we were streaming video to the home over the DSL networks that I described. And we had Hong Kong Telecom, British Telecom, even a deal with Blockbuster Enron as they were going to commoditize the digital highway. Those were some exciting times.
So they did not, in fact, almost miss the boat. Like,
well, they got in trouble for cooking the books a little bit later. I was fortunate to have converted from an attempted third party at the joint venture table with Blockbuster Enron to a sales agreement of Motorola with those two entities, and they bought our boxes, and we were not involved in any of their schemes. But alas,
dodge that bullet.
Yes, but alas, what did happen is, as many of us recall, 9/11 happened, and that impacted the downturn of many industries, and semiconductor was one of them. Right. Because we were kind of this misfit, because all along we were sort of a system solution business and a chip business arm of Motorola. Now, as a side note, Motorola had acquired a cable set-top box company from Horsham, Pennsylvania. So they were up there, and we were in Texas and a little bit in Phoenix. And we were told to do telco TV. And at this time, there were the walled gardens between cable and telco.
Yeah.
So anyways, this business unit was
back when that was still a word, telco TV.
Yeah. This business unit was shut down. There were about 100 people in this division, and 95 of the engineers went to AT&T and worked on the initial UVerse box here at the AT&T labs that were in Austin. And the division manager had pulled a handful of us aside, me included, and said, hey, why don't we leave this Motorola mothership and start our own thing? So that's kind of how I got into entrepreneuring. The first experiment had a large founding team, and we did a whole bunch of market validation for VCs. Had a agreement signed with a Dallas area strategic investor. And when Austin Ventures and our hometown merged two companies, Motive and Broadjump, the Dallas investor pulled out, and it was on the day of wire transfer. So we learned the first lesson of entrepreneurial activity, which is you cannot celebrate until the money's in the bank. Agreements don't mean
it's like
anything.
buying a house, right? It's like you can't celebrate until you literally have the key in your hand and you are walking to the door and you unlock the key.
Yeah. Or the other lesson is cash is king. I learned that one many times throughout the 16-year life of Affinity. So anyways, that was a team of 7. We had been at Cable Labs doing more market validation with the Time Warner, Cox, Charter, Comcast. Everybody liked this vaporware that we were discussing with. And basically, Art Lancaster and I came home and we told the team that we needed to just build it and they would come. And we were the only 2 crazies that wanted to do that. So that's what we did.
Right.
Shut down this, it was called Entregate. And we started Affinity with a blank sheet of paper. And the very first thing that we did was to, go back to the big tier 1s that we had been pitching to and try what I like to call today corporate Kickstarter. So we went to 4 of them and said, if you each put in $200,000, we can build the first version of this. And Comcast honestly did the first favor to us because they gave us a fast no. Sometimes that's really hard to get. You get dragged along forever when the answer, no, if you don't get a yes, the answer is still there's no. Fundamentally, that's another lesson of business. But essentially, we ended up pulling money out of our own pocketbooks, and we dialed it down to something that we could self-fund. And the very first product we developed was called Instalan, and that was about setting up in a simple, instant way the local area network of the house. And
cool. And was that using proprietary stuff at the time, or was that already starting to use? So for those people on the show, I've talked about Tier 69 and USP and management protocols before, and I promise that every show will not be about this, but it's what we know. So, but so by that point, were you using the standardized stuff to do that, or was that still your own solution?
At this time, this was the year 2003 that I'm referencing. And at that
time, it didn't exist yet.
It didn't really exist. The Cable Labs organization had tried to address the LAN needs for standards and cable home. And we were participating in all that, but fundamentally cable home wasn't taking off. And we had to do what we had to do. So we created an architecture and structure along the way. That first thing was just a PC application that had peer-to-peer connectivity with other computers in the environment, would work on Windows and Mac systems. And from the LAN side, would use the embedded web server of the DOCSIS cable modem gateway, or eventually retail router to set up and secure and personalize the home network for the subscriber. And
that's so cool, because we were just talking about how sort of the evolution of that setup to the way things are now. And back then, like some of the basic concepts of rudimentary web APIs didn't exist, right? So the idea that you would have some sort of local application that communicate with the gateway through its web interface, right, was kind of not crazy, but new, right? And now you've seen it come full circle where now it's an app on the phone, right?
Exactly. So this company ran independently of Finergy from 2003 to 2019. So a good ride. We had nationwide deployments of this home networking software with everybody but Comcast. I always say that was by design because Comcast
Yeah.
asks for the most and wants to pay the least. But it started with Time Warner Cable and then spread to Charter, and then Cox came calling. The list goes on. Cablevision, Bresnan with Netgear, we went into Virgin Media. I have yet to meet Richard Branson one-on-one, but that's a bucket list item.
In space. Meet him in space.
Yeah. Or at the depths of the ocean, right? Although maybe not after the last
Well,
month
not anymore.
of events. But anyhow, the challenge of doing all this entrepreneuring and where we had come from is we really had big vision and initiatives. We had caught the broadband bug with this joint venture that I talked about. And as we went to the cable cos, we said, hey, basically we're telling them to abandon the set-top box that was the baby blanket for their brand, because that was a fat box. It cost a lot of money at the time, $300 to $500 for the set-top boxes, and instead merged the video voice data service in that lowly router that could do it, because we did it in the Skunkworks project at Motorola, and essentially do triple play over IP video. Now,
right.
A minute ago, I referenced this as home network solution. That you're frequently taught in entrepreneuring to solve the problem that needs aspirin rather than vitamin, meaning it's a critical problem that the customer you're trying to sell to is going to pay for now and not in the future. And it turned out that Wi-Fi was the headache. I mean, we know it. And even today, Wi-Fi can still be a headache. Interestingly enough, and a lot of that is driven by Internet of Things and all the myriad devices and the amount of computing we're now doing in both the up and downstream ways throughout the household with multiple users on not just computers, but video door cams now. So there's a lot more demand and load on the network.
Well, and it sucks because, and we talk, one of the things we always about on the show so far is that there a lot of the network technologies that are out there exist not because they're good, right? Because they were the most useful at the time to the use case, or they have some other benefit that becomes the primary use case, even though it's not good for the other stuff that we need to do with it. And Wi-Fi is like the best example of that, because ultimately the whole reason it is so pervasive is because people don't want to run wires everywhere, and it is very interoperable, right? Thanks to the work of a lot of people that we know. So everyone everyone knows what it is, and every device you have, that is the easiest way for it to start getting connected to a network. It just sucks for a lot of use cases.
Indeed. But, that created opportunity for us. So, at the very beginning of the company, we made things simple, like taking a computer that was not wireless, because those were around in 2003, and with this simple wizard, enabling it to be wireless. So fundamentally, this InstaLAN was self-install kits. We would deploy USB sticks or PC cards along with it, and the customer got a box, and it was a click, connect experience. If we detected through
So was that so that they
operating
didn't have to do it themselves?
They didn't have to do it themselves. We
it was
unwrapped the device drivers and installed it. Basically had a 3-step thing that was graphical and dialed down to very simple, that the intent was anybody could do it. And installed the device driver if needed to make the computer go wireless. Set the right networking parameters to have like dynamic addressing, etc. And then
Yeah. Yeah. So all the basic
use the
configuration stuff that now
computer
we do.
to program the SSID web key, and then into WPA. And also took care of personalizing not only the network name or SSID, but also the login access to the administrative console of these
Right.
devices, because at default, at the time they were things like admin password, which is really insecure, and
Oh
anybody
yeah.
could log into.
It was a thing. It was like, that was the thing. That was how you hacked people's modems. So it's like,
Yeah. And so that self install was, I mean, we did over 30 million self installs with this software. Um, Hooked it up to built server software for the operations and for care. And essentially, this product offering looked a lot like uh, what's enabled through Broadband Forum and TR69 and 369.
Mhm.
And so we had been following any and all standards related to this kind of role for broadband operators. And when DSL Forum became Broadband Forum, we were full court press evangelizing this to the cable companies that they needed to jump on this bandwagon. It would enable us to move beyond the handful of parameters that I told you we configured to all the
Right. Right.
things in the data model, to have a lot more visibility and insights and all that. And then we were in the backyard of the other thing that's made Wi-Fi very successful is the Wi-Fi Alliance, and following all those things, inclusive of today's Easy Mesh. So I guess
Mhm.
it was the perfect
Yeah.
confluence.
Yeah. No, no, for sure. Right. Right. So yeah. So fast forward to today then. So like that was a way of doing things that worked very well. Right.
Yeah, and
And
we
now,
actually so in 2012, we gutted the back end of our platform. We acquired a TR69 ACS from Sagem, who wanted to unload that from their portfolio and took over the
oh,
customer and the team and the IP, and solution. And what that did for us is our DNA was always about that simple uh, user experience, whether you're the subscriber or the staff of the operator.
mhm.
And then bolting in the ACS brought in kind of a tier one, highly configurable, scriptable, you know, engine that would do bulk jobs, very sophisticated things. So it was a nice coupling, and it
Yeah.
got us onto a standard backplane. I think that's when I started working with you in the broadband
Yeah.
forum. It
Indeed.
was Affinity. And then,
Yeah.
ultimately in 2019, at, in the middle 15 period, we started getting inbound calls from the rural telcos, um, GBTC
Inbound
in our
calls.
backyard, Twin Lakes, MetroNet, these kinds of companies, EPB. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and, and, but there were 5,000 of them versus the 50 tier ones that we were selling to. And I was your chief
Right.
everything officer, including chief sales officer. And I knew I had to either build a team or find a partner. So I went partner
Right.
shopping and ultimately NISC, which is the National
Yep.
Information Solutions Cooperative, um, which is a market leader in ERP software for running broadband and utility rural operations. Uh,
Mhm. Mhm.
had meter management for the electric customers, but had no gateway management for the broadband
Right.
customers.
Right.
And we were the missing puzzle piece.
Do
So
you
that,
see, so I want to ask about that because, um, so I don't want to, that it's a long conversation to get to the end of this, but like there is, because of the move towards the way that customers understand utilities and the way utilities understand themselves, there are a number of energy companies out there that are getting into broadband and other broadband companies that are getting into energy. And is that is that happening sort of under the surface more and more at the tier 2, tier 3 level?
Yes, for sure. And, so didn't see it so much during my tenure at NISC, which spanned 2019 to early 22. I joined a Nokia in May of 22. And Nokia is very strong in public safety, utility,
Yep.
power, smart grid, and more, and broadband. And EPB, as it turns out, was an Affinity customer, but also an early Nokia customer for their entry into municipal or down market from the tier 1, tier 2 broadband. And the first gig city in the U.S. was Chattanooga in the 2010 era, and that was
remember that.
Nokia access.
And that was
network.
that was done by them, right? That was municipal. Like they spearheaded that, or was
Yeah,
that done by a
the
company?
municipal.
No,
No,
I
it was
remember that because it was a big
EPB
deal
is the
that they were the ones that were doing it. Yeah.
Electric Power Board, which was a municipal authority within Chattanooga. So, they built that first gig city, and it really remade the city. And as you asked this power question, the utility ended up modernizing the electric plant with the smart meter upon connected. And then we're building out the fiber rings and saw the opportunity to just add a little bit more to that, get a broadband residential service going. So that's kind
Right,
of
because why
how
wouldn't
it
you at this
started.
point, right? You're already
Yeah. And to get back to your question, I mean, now we're seeing more and more demand for, with the rural funding and the Connect All America initiatives of the federal government, the latest round being the BEAD, or broadband, what is it? Equal access,
yeah.
something like that.
It was a reverse
acronyms
engineered acronym as usual.
But yes, the BEAD funding coming from the NTIA is a $46 billion fund that just got allocated to each of the state broadband offices. And as that happens, it's been heralded as a time where this is very equivalent to the electrification of America that was federally sponsored. And now we have, and those were the electric companies did that job. And so when you look at the places that are unserved or underserved, a lot of the backbone of those communities is that electric entity. And so more of the electric co-ops are starting to do broadband either themselves or in partnership with the telco or MSO in their community. And, basically that same thing that EPB led the market with is coming back full circle, because these factories need to be modernized. Fiber is a very robust and kind of future-proof network medium to facilitate all communications. And if you can get the twofer going by having factory modernization on top of revenue generation with best broadband, it's a win-win.
Right. It ends up transforming. You're right. It totally is like electrification, because that's what ended up transforming communities into actually like good places to live. right?
Yeah,
And-
indeed. And, I mean, that's been a big thing for the last few years with the pandemic, right? People left the expensive cities and the high rise environments of the coastal cities and got their first home on land, remote work, and then they opened up their computer and it's like, where's the internet?
yeah, yeah,
But, there's
yeah.
been, this is not a new effort. This BEAD is $46 billion on top of about 60 that's been previously allocated through things like ACAM and RDOF and, the list goes on. And, it's interesting that we now see some pockets of America that have better broadband than we might have in a suburb in Austin, Texas, It's
Right,
happening.
right. No, I always find our situation is always weird up here because uh, Verizon basically left, but they left after they laid a bunch of fiber because they were going to launch FiOS in New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont,
Uh-huh.
but they left and they sold it all to Fairpoint. And so Fairpoint's
Yeah.
like, there's all this fiber laying around. And so for a while they had almost like it was like a stealth service because it was only available in a couple places. So they're like, if you happen to have those fiber optics that Verizon laid previously, we'll offer you a service. But now it's consolidated and they bought everything and it's everywhere
Sure.
now. But we were always like some of the first people that just had it by accident.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you sort of see now? Like, so you're doing a combination of that, but also being on top of the the management aspect too, still where, because from what I understand, it's sort of like,
Yeah.
a lot of the operators, they're trying to come online. So a lot of these people who are trying to deliver broadband for the first time, they're trying to come online and they sort of need some guidance there. And one of the ways that guidance is provided is by having, the managed subscriber network be ready to go, with this appropriate standards and everything.
Yeah, sure. Well, when I joined Nokia, and after having been an entrepreneur for, nearly 20 years, the last thing I thought is that I would be joining a big global 100 at this point in my career. But I actually I interviewed with 4 companies and I chose between the very smallest and scrappiest that was doing some disruptive things to enable broadband things
Ah,
and Nokia, and Nokia won out. But I'd say I've been really happy with the choice. When I got hired in, that piece that I have belabored in this phone call was about this much of what I work on from a solutions perspective, because they, said you need to represent all this stuff, and Nokia is one of the only companies in telecom that absolutely supports the end-to-end connected electronics.
right,
We make it all.
right.
So
Just from their
we have
portfolio alone, right? Like they have
yeah,
everything.
we have the Wi-Fi, we have the ONT or modem, we have the cabinet in various forms for optical line termination or OLT, and then we have the IP optical into the BNG web scale. So, we compete against Cisco and Juniper over there,
Hmm.
down to the Comtrans, Ixel, community at the endpoint Wi-Fi. So it's a broad portfolio. Uh, with my background in software, really involved not only in our Nokia solution that has the ACS, which is called NWCC Nokia Wi-Fi Cloud Controller. Don't try to say that too fast. And upstream from that, for managing the access network, our modern system is called Altiplano. So that's where we're doing the software-defined access networking. And so,
Right.
that's
Okay. Yep.
stretched my brain a little bit. And
Mm.
specifically, before I go beyond that, what I'm excited about with Nokia is not only our scale of company that allows us to deliver attractive price points on all these components, but the company is really committed to being a leader and being active in standards bodies for all things fixed and cellular connectivity. And anytime Nokia does something proprietary to be in line with what the market is doing, as soon as the standard comes along, like Easy Mesh, the proprietary is ripped out and the standard is put in. And
That's
that
very
speaks
refreshing
to
for
my
me.
background and, what your QA cafe is all about, helping
Hmm.
ensure the products are working to those standards. And um, it's something that I can definitely stand for. And then we're doing some exciting work on both ends of the subscriber and the access network operator in opening up application marketplaces for the consumer for
Yeah.
value-added
Yep.
services like smart home or parental controls, physical security, etc. And then on the access side, we have also a third-party ecosystem for making the network run better or taking advantage
Oh,
of
cool. Okay.
the slicing to be able to offer very
Yeah.
secure walled services for maybe the medical industry. I like to point to, hey, if you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
take a
Yeah.
rural area that doesn't have the doctor um, in the town that can perform that advanced surgery, but they got the broadband network through funding. Um, Now you could drop in an application that match makes the doctor, schedules the network to be available for the surgical operation,
It's awesome.
secures and locks it down, and just enables it to go. And all of a sudden, you know, through the work that Nokia is doing, we're now engaging the vertical industries, whether that's the medical
Right.
example
Right.
I gave you, or you can imagine all sorts of use cases for AR, VR with factories and supporting
Right.
gear. And there's just that's why I like this job. I get to continue envisioning
I'm
and
glad.
making happen things.
I'm very glad.
In
I'm very glad.
addition
And so
to, in addition to growing Nokia's market share in rural broadband is what I'm in the business development role. So plotting and
I
making that
appreciate
happen.
that you are that excited about and have that good of a pitch down after only a year. So, uh, no, so like one of the things that I appreciate that you touched on is that sort of it, it's funny how, right? And again, this is back to the story that we are telling before, where it's like Wi-Fi is extremely useful and not best for all use cases, but the internet itself has ran into that same situation, right? It's like the internet is not designed on purpose. It is designed through sort of organic chaos, right? And it it was optimized back, 15 years ago or more. It was optimized everywhere for best effort traffic. That's what its job was, right? That's what its job was. And we had other mechanisms before that for things that were not best effort traffic, like making phone calls, for example, right? But now you
Yeah,
were trying to expect the same thing to do everything, and it can't do everything until we now are going to this next evolution where people like Nokia are able to do this thing where you're like, okay, now we know the end-to-end application that needs to be delivered, and we'll tell the internet what to do to get you know where we never did that before. And then we're going to run into that with the gateways too, because it's like, yes, we're going to be installing these apps on the gateway, but the entire point of doing that is so that this box that is expected to do everything can be told to do the right thing for the right purpose, which it never was never expected to do that before.
for
So
sure.
I appreciate that that's what you're working on, because I also find that a very exciting field. Yeah. All
Well, I
right.
think one of the most exciting things
Anything else
about,
you wanted to throw in there? Yeah.
yeah, I would just say, one of the most exciting things about that is it's um, in no one company can do this on its own. And so these marketplaces are really important to bring innovation happening in other sectors together. And even this SDN platform, the Altiplano platform, is fundamentally designed to be interoperable with any network, including our competitor networks.
Right.
So,
which is so super important, because when I was talking
absolutely.
to Joaquin Bennerholt from IOPSIS, right, and he's obviously talking about the concept is the same, but inside of any particular ecosystem, the bottleneck is the thing that is not interoperable and standardized, right?
Mhm.
That's always the bottleneck. And once you recognize that, and if you're working for a company that recognizes that, and it's like, oh, well, it's time to us to rip out the standards, rip out whatever we're doing and put the standard in, because otherwise we're going to be stuck like this, right?
Yep.
It
Indeed.
slows down all the innovation and all of the progress. All right. Well, I
So, yeah.
appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much,
Anytime you
Jason.
want
I
to do so.
appreciate it as well.
Yeah. I appreciate the fact that I've gotten to know you over the last 2 years or so that we've been doing it.
You bet.
Yeah. All right. So I will close the show with the usual things. Please the usual YouTube stuff. If you like what we're talking about and you have any questions, feel free to please comment and use that thumbs up button and give it a like. I feel so cheesy saying that stuff, but it's like that's the things. If you ask people, then they'll do it, right? Give it a like. Subscribe to us while you're here right now. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you're listening to us on audio only, please do subscribe to us on your podcast platform, because you'll get the automatic downloads and immediately know what the next show is. And it's really great. And leave us a review while you're at it if you want. But above all, the storyline for all of us here is, even no matter how we got here, it's because we love it. So I encourage everyone to own the nerdy things that you love and have fun doing them. Until next time. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.